last time we talked about staying motivated in difficult times, because we all know right now, going through the coronavirus pandemic, that it is very difficult to stay motivated right now. And what I wanted to share with the attendees this month is talking about using OCBs to supercharge your rebound. So OCBs are very interesting, and I'm excited to share this with you. And if you're listening to the replay, if you're watching the replay, tell me in the chats where you're calling in from, or where you're listening from. Would love to hear kind of where you're coming from and what you're where in the world that you're watching this from. So my name is Jessica Prater. My business is J. Prater Consulting. I am a business based in Middle Tennessee. I focus on teamwork and development, particularly for small to mid-sized businesses, although I still serve a couple Fortune 500 companies as well. I really love talking about the psychology of teamwork. My background is in industrial organizational psychology, and for the most part, in the last decade of my career, I've primarily used that with training and development, adult education. That's been a big piece of what I've really used in psychology over the past few years. And what's really interesting is I'm starting to have people call on me for different things. And those things are really talking about the psychology in the workplace. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I do actually have my undergraduate degree in counseling psychology, but I didn't actually pursue that. I don't have a license to practice. And so, people sometimes get confused about organizational psychology and think I'm a therapist. I'm not, although I have a lot of understanding about psychology in the workplace. How it really comes into play, especially right now, is talking about the psychology of teams, the psychology of individuals whenever you're coming into the workplace, and also organizational development and structure. We don't check our brains out at the door. And a big part of getting through all of this current pandemic is actually working through the psychological process of going in and working every day, working in an increased threat. I know we have somebody on the call that actually is in the hospitality industry. And so I know your industry has changed significantly in the past few months. And you're looking at, serving your guests to the best way possible, really creating an environment where your team is comfortable to come to work every day. And so my business is really pivoting right now. And we're talking a lot about how to really work in this current environment and how to really create an environment where we're really being respectful of the psychology and the dynamics that are actually in this current environment. So we've talked about this through this entire series. Problem solving has fundamentally changed. I think what's very interesting is when we first started this series back in January, a lot of what we talked about problem solving fundamentally changing was the idea that with the 21st century, with technology, with teams being across the world, problem solving looks very different now than it even did 20 years ago. I would propose to you that back in January, when I started this series, I would have no idea how much problem solving would be changing just in the last few months. Think about how you worked back in February versus how you work now. For me, my rhythm and routine looks very differently. Before I hopped on this webinar, I jumped over and hung out with my kiddo for a few minutes and turned on his favorite cartoon ever, Cars. And I bribed him to not come in and interrupt me during this webinar. I'm working from my home office. Things look very different for me right now. Dynamics look very different for me. And so it's really important that we look at problem solving and the psychological processes behind it. It's really critically important to know that things have changed. And with this change, you have to be very mindful of the psychological principles that are impacting everyone right now, regardless of what industry, regardless of what you're doing. There's not a single industry that has not been touched by this pandemic. And so it's really important that we, in some ways, get back to basics. And so what I want to share with you guys today is what is a fundamental process that all of us go through on a daily basis, but we typically don't think about it. And that is your organizational commitment. Now, how is organizational commitment defined? Commitment itself is the force that binds an individual to a course of action that is related to a particular target. Now, I will tell you guys, organizational commitment and organizational commitment behaviors are a fairly new phenomenon. I'm about to date myself here. I went through graduate school in 2008 through 2010 at NTSU. And when I was going to graduate school, this was actually one of the newer concepts that was being talked about. Commitment, measuring commitment. We talk a lot about motivation, but what about the commitment itself? Not just to your organization, but to your team. And this is really critical to talk about right now, because the way that we are engaging with our organizations, the way that we are engaging with our customers right now are so fundamentally different. And as part of that, we really need to look at commitment, both commitment of our team, but also commitment of ourselves to the mission, to the organization. And so what I want to talk about are these OCBs, organizational commitment behaviors, not OCD, that's something different, but OCBs, these things that really show the external actions that show that we are committed to the organization. Now, I will make sure that I say this, because sometimes I start talking about some of these psychological processes and people think, man, this is manipulation. Now, first of all, manipulation is not necessarily a bad word, okay? I want to wake up on time every morning. And so I actually manipulate my brain because I set my coffee pot in the morning to go off at a certain time. And as a result, I'm smelling my coffee laying in bed. And even though I'm the kind of person that normally hits the snooze button about 10 times, I can smell that coffee. It makes me want to get up on time. That is actually a manipulation. And so sometimes when I start talking about these processes, people get a little hesitant. And they're like, aren't you taking advantage of the situation? Is this a manipulation? And my answer to this is, well, sort of. But if you have the best intentions in mind, if you have something that you're really aiming for, and it is with good intentions, we are all essentially manipulating each other to do one thing or another. My child at 3, almost 4 years old, has already figured out how to manipulate situations to get what he wants. And so we're going to talk through some of these things because very likely you're already doing this. But what I want you to realize is that you need to be very intentional, especially if you lead a team, at looking at these organizational commitment behaviors. So I want to talk you through some everyday OCBs. So first of all, I want to share a study that was done, and it's directly related to OCBs. A study was done to predict the longevity and loyalty of employees. Did you know that one of the top indicators of the company loyalty was it was actually related to a trash can? And if you saw me doing Facebook Live last week, I held up my trash can that sits by my desk, and I said, this is actually a great predictor of employee commitment. Now people kind of say, what in the world does a trash can have to do with that? Basically, some scientists took a look at employees in a business, and they actually set up a manipulation, and they set up a trash can, and they had a piece of trash that person did not throw on the floor. And what they observed was people walking past the trash can. Who picked up the piece of trash and who didn't? Okay, again, that trash that they didn't make. And believe it or not, that was actually a strong indicator for the loyalty for a company that somebody had. Organizational commitment behaviors sound very basic. Okay, so you're probably not going to go into your office and throw paper around and see who picks it up. But very likely, on your team who's that person that's going to go above and beyond. This sounds very basic, but in actuality, this is what helps us understand and who really has that level of commitment and loyalty. Consider for a moment the stickers that Apple send with all of their products. Now, guys, I have to tell you, I'm doing this webinar off of a MacBook. I am all in. I am very much an Apple user. And with every Apple product, they send those stickers. And while you maybe think, hey, that's super nice of them, it's actually a small task to help you create an organizational commitment behavior as a customer. Where did you put that sticker? Did you put it on the back of your car? Did you put it up on a bulletin board? For me, for years, I actually had a bulletin board sitting by my home office desk that had an Apple sticker sitting on it. Somewhere in your workspace, maybe you're seeing it on a regular basis. You may think that it's a cheap marketing ploy, but it's beyond that. It's not just identifying yourself that you're an Apple user to others. It's actually inviting you to take an action. And with that, that small OCB has actually impacted your self-identity. What about your professional development organization that you were part of? I see Lori Williams has joined us. Lori is a part of Cable. Cable is a group, a women's group that meets here in Middle Tennessee. And I think about Cable. When you volunteer with Cable, maybe you volunteer to help run the registration table, or you recommend someone else check out the group. Those are actually organizational commitments behaviors. Yes, the organization is benefiting from the behavior in the short term. They are benefiting from, hey, you're getting volunteer hours, the table is getting manned, we're picking up the name tags at the end of the event. But it also builds your commitment to the organization in a long term. I know this is common sense. You think about, well, of course, Jessica, if somebody is engaged and excited, they're more likely to actually do those things, to volunteer, to raise your hand. But if you think about it, it's not only benefiting the organization, it's actually changing the identity of the individual, okay? You can create OCBs that help build brand loyalty for your business, especially with your employees right now. Now, there's a really interesting argument going on, and I read a really fascinating article the other day. With the increase of cleaning, the article was talking about how forcing an individual to actually clean, because we all know there's more cleaning happening in every workspace right now. If you interact with the public, if you're out, if your customers are coming in, there's more cleaning happening. And there was an argument happening that you should not demean your employees and make them do the extra cleaning, because that's going to be ultimately more psychologically draining and demeaning of that person. And, the article had some good points, and I was reading through some of it, and, yes, if you're being asked to, I don't know, do kind of the dirty work every single time, and you're got all these other things on your plate, I definitely could see how that could be demeaning. But the flip side is businesses are realizing that asking their employees to pitch in is actually building loyalty, because they feel more invested in the organization, and those organizational commitment behaviors are actually building their loyalty to the organization. Beyond that, it actually creates some psychological safety, knowing that, hey, I'm contributing to the fact that we have a clean environment, that we are serving our customers with excellence right now in this difficult time, and we're going above and beyond. Sometimes people say that some of these OCBs that you create can almost feel too much of asking someone, if somebody has a lot on their plate already, if somebody is, already overstretched, there's definitely a place to seeing how much somebody is doing. I've been around a lot of people in a corporate space, and I actually worked in a corporate space for 7 years. And, we always used to joke about, don't make a suggestion because you're going to be the one that has to take that project on. The people that were oftentimes most loyal and most committed were the folks that raised their hand and sometimes got taken advantage of by their managers and were given lots and lots of work. And that would lead eventually to burnout, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother webinar. But creating OCBs and opportunities for teams to pitch in, it really truly helps build that sense of ownership and teamwork. And as a result, really ends in better team development and also better performance and results. You're probably already creating OCBs with your customers. What I want you to do is open your eyes to the concept so that you can be more intentional, both with creating and observing those OCBs with customers. So that might be, customers that are engaging you with social media, customers that are participating in your programs, customers that are going above and beyond on their side to really show their loyalty to your organization. But also observe those OCBs from your employees. And don't get me wrong, sometimes people hear some of this and they're like, I'm not a manager. How does this affect me? I don't manage others. How does this affect me? It's really important that you know how OCBs work, because not only can you help really have open dialogue with your manager when you're seeing those gaps, but also you can encourage your team, those around you, maybe if they're struggling with organizational commitment. Your OCBs might look very differently. And with that, you have to think about how you are coming to play. I think it's so ironic right now that that's the slide that I put up was with a mom and a child. But your OCBs are looking completely differently right now. If you have a team that is trying to just get it done. And so it is important that you really think about very measurably, how are you engaging with your team? How are you working with your team right now? Your organizational commitment behaviors from 2 months ago might look different than they look now. You might not have folks raising their hand for extra projects because you're just trying to get it done. And so it is critically important that your OCBs be a life-saving device right now. If you are a manager of others, if you are somebody that works with others, that engages with others, that motivates others, you need to think about those organizational commitment behaviors as your life-saving device. What is the temperature of your team? Who is committed? Who's struggling? And this is not a situation where you're saying, okay, if you're not showing OCBs, you're off the team. This is not that time. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is this is a good time to look for those things that might indicate that someone is committed. And if they are not committed, that's a great opportunity to have some open, honest conversation. It might be something that they're really struggling with, and it might not be anything that you can even change. But simply having that conversation, simply getting into that situation where you're saying, hey, this is, not ideal. This is definitely not an ideal working situation, but how can we remove barriers for you? How can we help you really do the best that you can right now? So let's talk about 3 drivers of OCBs, because I want to make sure that I hit on these because it's very interesting right now how these show up. So the first organizational commitment aspect is affect or emotion. This is the feeling of togetherness. This is the actual feeling of loyalty, the feelings that an individual gets as a result of working with your team. This is in a very emotional time for working as a team. People are being very authentic. I'm loving everything that I'm seeing from corporate CEOs actually calling in from their home offices. They have kids, they have dogs. We are just being very, very authentic right now. And that drives a lot of emotion for individuals. That closeness, that feeling that your business actually makes people feel is really important to think about. Continuity. Now, this is the flip side. This is the fear. People might be committed to your organization because they are afraid to be on the job market. Now, This is really interesting right now because the job market is in a big state of flux, and there may be people on your team holding on just because they don't want to look for another job right now. Okay. Now, there is some sense of healthiness to this. You know, you definitely want to have people that are committed because they are, you know, want to be with you. They want to be with your organization, and there is always some sense of fear that's going to help them drive to the organization. This doesn't need to be your primary motivator, and I want to make sure that I bring this up just so that you are aware of it. This is dangerous to only rely on this type of organizational commitment. The folks that are with your organization just because they are afraid to go somewhere else. We certainly want to create an environment where people are not feeling that this is the only reason they're committed to the organization. And finally, connection, normative commitment. And this is the habit piece of it. This is the connection, the going the same place, doing the same thing, commitment to your organization, the people and relationships that you have within an organization. This is very critically important because I believe right now that this commitment piece is being rocked by this pandemic, especially because we are in such a different environment. Even as businesses are transitioning back into the workplace, your workplace very likely does not look the same that it did in the beginning of March. A lot of us are having to go through special processes, whether it be cleaning, whether it be procedure changes, whether it be process changes. And with that, you have to be very aware that these commitments, these connection commitments, the normative commitment is going to feel very different for people. I think it's also very interesting that as we transition back into being in the workplace, people are going to have another adjustment. You know, people have been working from home or people have been out of work for the last 2 months. And with that, we have to be very, very mindful that this transition is going to be uncomfortable again for people. And I've read several articles, and I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but there is a high likelihood that we're going to go through another peak in illness. And with that, people may have to change again. And so thinking about that normative connection for organizational commitment is very important. OCBs are an indicator of identity. If you can take nothing else away from this, having organizational commitment behaviors are things that folks actually do that help them build their commitment to the organization, help them build their identity as part of the organization. And it's very critical that you give folks opportunity to really participate in organizational commitment behaviors, to do things that actually builds their loyalty to the company. So questions for the future. How do we observe, measure, and shape OCBs? I think this is something that I continue to think about or think through myself. And then also, how do you monitor OCBs in yourself? How do you look at yourself and say, I'm not extremely committed right now. I'm struggling right now. I need help. I need assistance. I need support. And seeing that within your own self so that you can have that conversation with colleagues, with your manager, to build your commitment. Because commitment is what's going to help you and your team get through this very difficult time. Feel free, if you have any questions, either come off mute or feel free to pop those questions into the group chat. While you're thinking through that, our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, June 28th at noon. We're going to be deciding the topic. I have a very good sense of what I'm going to be sharing next time, but I will tell you more information will be out on my website. I want to make sure that I have the right information to share with you guys. It's actually going to be on something very near and dear to my heart that is a really key psychological concept that you really can use in getting through this difficult time. If you have questions, if you have a topic that you would like me to address in this monthly series, whether you're here live on the call or you're watching the replay, feel free to shoot me an email. I would love to get your topic in. Okay, so if there are any questions, feel free to come off mute or pop them in the group chat. I'll give you just a minute.